Hey there, outliers. Niiamah Ashong here, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of your journey. Today, I have a pleasure of continuing our journey here with an incredible outlier, and this outlier is someone that I'm starting to get to know, who is bringing out a message of hope, a message of increasing, and a message of growth all around. It's Naomi DeBello, and Naomi, I am just really like pleased that we get to be in space together. Thank you so much for making the time for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Niiamah.
Yeah, it feels good. So I shared a little bit about like the impact I can already see that you're out there here. Tell us more about you and the game that you're playing right now.
So I have a podcast called The Light of Life, um, bringing helping people share their stories with medical conditions and disabilities, um, hospital experiences. I've been inspired by my own journey uh, to help people who've been in similar circumstances.
Would you want to start us off here and just share a little bit about your journey so far, just so we can all be on the same page with you?
Yes, so I was born with a congenital heart defect. I've had six surgeries on my heart. Um, and so I've had like experience having like operations and being in the hospital. And I just wanted to help people who have gone through similar circumstances.
Yeah. What got you started on this? Like, what made you say, like, all right, this is like, I'm in. I'm going to make this happen.
So it first started when the idea first started when I began writing my book. I'm currently writing a book about my medical journey. And so I thought, because it hit me, there are so many different kinds of medical conditions and disabilities that people have to have in their everyday life, that go through in their everyday life. And I thought, what if there was a podcast just interviewing people about like all these different medical experiences? And that's when I came up with the idea.
Yeah. So tell me here, like, what do you feel like you do differently when it comes to that podcast than other people do? Like,
Um, well, I I've definitely been I've actually been educating myself. I've been
mm,
learning a lot more about uh, medical conditions I've never even heard of. And I think that's so important to bring so much awareness to many different types of chronic illnesses and disabilities. There are so many that I have interviewed people for, and they've had things that I've never heard of before and that are very rare. And I hope it helps people feel less alone.
yeah. Yeah. My number one fear is actually being alone. Were you going to say some
Mm.
more? Okay. My number one fear is actually being alone. Yeah, I think so at least. It's as time has gone on, things have started to shift. And there's the part about like being lonely versus being alone, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that there's something really in I get really tickled when people like just come out and just decide like, hey, like I have something I want to bring out to the world. It was missing for me, and now I want to bring it. Tell me, like, what's some of like the either cooler or like more impactful, maybe even just like heartwarming benefits that you've gotten for yourself or and for others as a result of starting up this podcast?
Uh, it has definitely been very life-changing. I get lots of messages from people saying how this helps them feel less alone dealing with their medical conditions, and how much it has helped them
Nice.
mentally too.
Nice. Um, do you have a business that goes along with this here, or do you do this? You have something else going on, and you come in, you podcast, and you on the side.
Uh, no, I just have the podcast.
Yeah. What was all right, so as I'm looking at this here, I'm very interested in like um some of like the bigger lessons that you learned for yourself as you like went down this journey of reaching out to people, getting people on here, so on and so forth. Like I, I'm curious about what are some of the lessons that you learned for yourself.
Wow, that's a really good question. Um, the lessons I've learned, um, it has really, it has really, has been ingrained into me to not take anything for granted and to be thankful for everything you do have. Focus more on the things you do have rather than the things you don't have. Focus on the things you can do rather than the things you can't do.
Mm. Yeah, would you mind? Is there like a situation or something that like you can help make that real for us here and like and see like to get to a time where you had to either wrestle with that or that became really clear to you?
Yeah, it has really opened my eyes more to my own experience after um after my open heart surgery in 2017. So before then, I couldn't really even walk anymore. It was Sometimes it was difficult for me to breathe on my own. I had to be on oxygen. It's just really instilled in me after the surgery, like now I'm able to walk and run, and I can breathe on my own. And that has really been so liberating. And I feel like yeah, that has really helped me realize to not take anything for granted.
Yeah, no, especially like I didn't know you back then. I'm grateful and I'm glad that all this is that this has been happening here. You know, I think that's absolutely fantastic here. And it's cool that like did you start the podcast before then or afterwards?
No, I just started the podcast just a couple years ago in 2022.
Yeah.
So it was about 5 years after my surgery.
Cool. Yeah. I think it's one of the benefits of doing this. I get to talk to some awesome people who are taking experiences of their life and turning it into something that helps like lift up and bring other people forward and things like that. So that's like I think that's absolutely like amazing. Like when it comes to let me ask you, like, so there's outliers out there that are either looking to build their own podcast, build their own platform. They want to go out and reach out to people. They want to get like new people into the world. How do you bring like new guests onto your podcast? How are you finding people? Because this is not like what you're doing like full time or anything like that. So I'm really curious about that process for you.
Yeah, so there's a website called Podmatch where I find most of my guests.
Yeah, familiar
Yeah.
with it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Nice. I like that too because like in outliers I put this out here for you like if there's something you're looking for like Podmatch like I'm not an affiliate like there's nothing that I have met the CEO and what I would say here is like it's like a number of my clients end up using it and it ends up being something where it can help bridge the gap of like of where people are going to come from, to
Mhm.
go into. And I know I reach out to people individually on my own outside of this here. And a lot of times I'm like, man, this could probably be a lot easier if there was something that was an organized system like that. But what I
Yeah.
love about it is like it opens the door right away.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So like what would you say has been one of the hardest parts about creating and we can talk about the podcast in particular. That's fine. But like, I think I'm really more interested in you, you know? So like, I'm interested in you and interested in like your growth as a leader in this field. All right.
Mhm.
So like, what has been one of like the harder parts, or like harder lessons or harder like challenges that you had to overcome as you grew in your leadership in this space?
Um, when I first when I first had it was when I first had the idea and when I wanted and when I wanted to initially launch the podcast was when I realized that um when I realized that um I have really was the moment when I realized I have really healed like mentally from all the medical trauma, because I feel like if I hadn't healed yet, I wouldn't have been ready to really speak about my own experience and and trying to get a podcast launched. So that has been that so that was like the biggest challenge to overcome. But it has been really beneficial.
Yeah. And what would you say is one of the hidden benefits or like, unexpected things that has come as a result of you stepping into leadership in this way? And it might be directly through the podcast. It might be like things that you're seeing in other parts of your life. Really curious about that.
Uh, yeah, you know, the biggest benefit it has really given me is being able to connect with people from that have that have had overcome so many different kinds of challenges, and it is again like learning about different medical conditions and disabilities has really benefited me personally to become an advocate for
Mm.
others.
Mm. Did you think that was where like things were going to go when you first started out with it? Like, tell me about like the difference between. I always want to know like, uh, you've been doing this for a number of years now, so I'm curious about like the journey from like when you first started to where you are right now, and not just about like how much better you got at podcasting and asking questions, but just like the journey of like what you ended up learning throughout that experience, like who you became as a result of taking this on.
Yeah, I definitely as time went on, I have grown a lot more confident. At the beginning, I was pretty nervous to to actually begin the podcasting,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
because it felt really nerve-wracking. But as I had gotten more familiar with how podcasting works, and and once I really began to uh, upload on a regular basis, then it started to become a lot easier.
Yeah. So tell me about this here. So when you first started, it was just kind of like a little bit more ad hoc than regular. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. Tell me about that. Like, so so I like this here because I think a lot of times, especially like with outliers here, we're thinking we need to get everything right and perfect from the very beginning. Uh, Tell me, how perfect was your podcast when you first launched
Ah, yeah, it definitely wasn't
it?
perfect.
Okay.
I was very nervous. My first episode was me sharing my own story, and I could tell like even just back listening to it now, I can tell I was very nervous, and I probably was not even quite ready to really fully talk about it, just because of uh I didn't I mean I talked about a little bit about my story, but I could tell it made me like very it was very raw and very emotional. Um and it kind of sounded like I just was not quite ready at first, but I'm really glad to this day I did that, because it has really helped me grow and
Yeah.
move on.
There's a component of this of like not of doing it before you're ready.
Mhm.
That I get really curious about. So like, um, yeah, I get really curious. Like right nowadays, uh, let me unpack this a little bit. I think the reason that I'm curious about this is that a I'm a there's basically doing this on my own has gotten me to the place where um in the past I would go to other people for help on what to do. Now the problem became eventually I wanted to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. Like I can definitely learn. I can come to you, Naomi, and be like, how did you start your podcast? What's your podcast? What kind of questions to ask? And I can learn how you do a podcast, and I could do it to some extent. Whether it's like it will never be as good as yours because I'm not you, you know. But I'm like I could take someone else's thing. But it wasn't until I started to realize like okay, hold on. I might accidentally take too much. Like I have a tendency to be a chameleon, right? Which is like to like go blend into whatever is around and miss whatever is like really like active for me. So I'm curious for you. So I guess I bring all that into space and such here to just be like, okay, finding like your own like flavor, your own style, how have things evolved for you from when you first started and you're like, okay, this is how I was going about it to where you are now?
Wow. Um, yeah, things have really have really evolved in terms of like how I said earlier, becoming more confident um and like being more con confident and not being like I guess a really big thing I noticed was I'm not as shy as I used to be.
Yeah,
I used to be
cool.
very quiet and shy.
Yeah,
I've started to really come out of my shell.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I like I'm appreciative. Like, I mean, you would have had to come over here. Like, I sent you a message. You're like, yeah, let's do this, you know. And I appreciate that, like that openness, that like that willingness here to come do this. And um, yeah, I'm glad you started the journey when you did, because I don't like because when I get here, it's like it put us into each other's orbits and spheres, you know. Um, Mary, let me see here. I think there are going to be some outliers out there who would love to continue down the journey with you. Would love to find out more about what you're doing and such. What's the best way that they can go ahead and do that?
So I am on Instagram at Naomi DeBello, NaomiDeBello. Um, I have my podcast on Apple Podcasts, The Light of Life.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. All right, outliers. So we have it here. Here, if there's anyone that outliers, if you're listening to this, firstly, go check out Naomi's work. Go reach out, connect there. Share this episode with anyone who you feel would really gain benefit from it. Like, and honestly, like I should maybe even say more specifically, like share it with one person that you think would be really helpful for them to be introduced to Naomi. Let's make that come to life here. And Naomi, like we're gonna wrap up this conversation. One of the ways I like to wrap up is just to see like you've been sharing things about your experience with all of us, you know, and I like to make sure that everyone that's involved has an opportunity to grow as well. So, what's one thing that you learned about yourself? What's one insight or takeaway that you got from a result of this conversation? And if the answer is nothing, the answer can be nothing. But I like to like put that into space.
Well, I do want to say thank you so much for having me on. This was this was really a really nice experience. Thank you, Niiamah. And
Mostly, I'm glad you're here.
uh, yeah, and I'd say thank you for bringing more awareness to my podcast because I want to help as many people as possible with medical conditions and disabilities who have had experiences in the hospital. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Last thing I like to leave with is what I call the time capsule question, Naomi. And the way that it works is it's really simple. It's just like, what's a message that you want to leave for yourself to listen to in 10 years? You'd be 10 years older. Your podcast would be 10 years long. Like, I've been on for 10 years. Like there's been a lot of experience. A lot can happen in
Yeah,
10 years, you
yeah.
know? A lot can happen there. What's a message that like you want to leave to yourself to like make sure you don't forget, regardless of where life might take you?
I'd say I would say to my future self, look look how far you have come. uh, after after now it's also been after almost 20 years before since your surgery. Look how far you've come now.
That, that. Well, Naomi, I truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for living your life as an outlier. Thank you for taking the time to show up in your leadership. Thank you for sharing your experiences and spreading the message that you have here and creating the space for people to really come in and have like support with you. I appreciate you. I thank you for your time and for your experience.
Thank you, Niiamah, for having me.